Hello and welcome. I'm Peter Baldaya, Director of Curatorial Affairs for the Huntsville Museum of Art. And I'm here today with my colleague, David Reyes, Curator of Exhibitions and Collections for the museum. We're very pleased to be hosting our monthly virtual artist studio visit today, presented in connection with the exhibition Looking at the Collection, Works on Paper, which is currently on view at the museum through February 13th, 2022. I want to thank you all for joining us. Today's guest is featured artist Helen Vaughn, who is no stranger to the Huntsville Museum of Art. Helen was a longtime resident of Huntsville before recently relocating to Augusta, Georgia, and she has had her artworks featured at the museum on many occasions, including works juried into our Red Clay Survey regional contemporary art exhibitions, an Encounters solo show in 1991, and another solo exhibition in 1998 when we opened our facility on Church Street. In addition, we're very pleased to own 16 of Helen's paintings, drawings, and prints dating from 1980 to 2013. And among those works is the arresting mixed media drawing titled Recognition Across the Divide, which is currently featured in our Works on Paper exhibition. Before we begin and talk to Helen, again, I want to remind everyone that during the course of the program, you can use the Q&A button on your screen to type in any questions as we proceed. We're hoping to get to some of those questions at the end of the session. And now I'll hand over the program to David Reyes, who will introduce today's artist, Helen Vaughn. David?
Thank you, Peter, and good afternoon, everyone. We are pleased to have with us today Helen Vaughn. For over 50 years, Helen Vaughn worked from her studio nestled in the picturesque woods behind her home near Montesano. During that time, she was a mainstay in the artistic community of Huntsville. While perhaps best known for her large-scale figurative paintings, she is also widely recognized for her landscape and still life compositions. Over the course of her career, Vaughn has mastered not only oil paint, but also pastel, charcoal, and colored pencil. In recent years, Vaughn's work has tended towards landscapes and still life oil paintings, which highlights her unique use of color, composition, and light. Born in Birmingham, Helen Vaughn grew up in Dothan, Alabama. She graduated with a BA degree from the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa. And in 1965, she moved to Huntsville, where she and her husband, Ed, raised 2 children. Helen and Ed recently moved to Augusta, Georgia to be closer to her son, Ned, and his family. Widely exhibited both in the region and nationally, Vaughn's work has been included in many group and solo exhibitions, including the National Museum of American Art at the Smithsonian Institution, Washington, D.C., the Pastel Society of America in New York, New York, and the Energen Corporation competition in Birmingham, Alabama. Her paintings have been featured in national publications, including American Artist and Pastel Artist International. She has won various awards and honors, and her work is included in numerous private, corporate, and museum collections, including the Maitland Museum of Art in Maitland, Florida, the Wiregrass Museum of Art in Dothan, Alabama, the Huntsville Museum of Art, and the collection of the White House in Washington, D.C. Please join me in welcoming from her brand new studio in Augusta, Georgia, Helen Vaughn.
Hi, thank you, David. And thank you, Peter, for those lovely, kind words. I appreciate them. And welcome to you all, my friends, whom I miss. I'm delighted to have you here in my new studio in Augusta, Georgia, where we're now settling in near Ned and his family. And we're very pleased to be here. Thank you for coming. Welcome. Before we begin to look at works today, I'd like to just say a few things generally about my paintings. I paint in I do visual work in 3 genres: landscape, still life and floral, and figurative works. And while the contents of these 3 groups are very different, I do think the work has things in common no matter the genre. What I try to do is show you I want you to see it fairly closely. In other words, I don't distance you from what I'm painting about or what I'm showing you. So it has that in common. What I try to portray in my paintings is a sense of intimacy, a sense of quiet, and sometimes solitude. The figurative works are typically female, except for the family pieces I've done. I paint women. I'm always asked, why do you always paint women? Well, the short answer is because I am one, and it just seems natural to me to do that. The other thing about the female figure that I find fascinating is the mood you can convey if you place someone alone in an interior setting. And that's where the figurative work generally is composed, is I photograph models in interior settings, and then I work from those photographs and sketches to produce the paintings of figures that you see. So another thing that ties my work together, I tend to work in series. And a good example of this would be the water lily paintings. I've done so many paintings with water lilies because I'm fascinated with that plant. I love the way it's made. I love the colors. I love the way it crowds the water. There's just lots about water lilies that I like, so I tend to paint them over and over and over again. Another example would be pears. You know, I'm just kind of obsessed with pears. And the first pear I painted was when I was 13 in art class in Dothan, Alabama, and it was in pastel, and I've still got that little painting. So anyway, those things my works have in common, no matter the genre, I think. I work from photographs that I take. I will find something that interests me, or I will have an idea, and then I set about figuring out how to translate that picture in my head to a surface that I can share with you, that you can see it too. So I will direct photo sessions. I provide the props. I pick the place. I pick the clothes that the models wear if it's a figurative work. I'm a fairly obsessive director. I know what I want it to look like, and I photograph it, and then I work from those photographs and the sketches and color notes that I do at the same time. For each painting I make, I keep a notebook that tells me about how I got colors, what the palette looks like, why I chose the palette I did, what to pay attention to. And I'll tell you what, the older I get, the more important those notes are, because if I go weeks without working on a piece, and I work on more than one thing at a time, I can go back to the notebook entries and pick it right up. This only works if you're an obsessive compulsive person like I am. It would drive other artists crazy, but that's why there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just what works for you. Now, I've said enough about the paintings in general. Let's look at some work. And we're going to look at examples of all three genres, and we're going to start with landscapes. So we'll look at the first slide, which is one of 4 landscape paintings that feature exactly the same plot of land. This is my friend's water garden, and I wanted to paint it in all 4 seasons. I wanted to paint the same place as the seasons changed the way you looked at it. And this is the pond garden in winter. Now, winter is fun to paint, but it's difficult because snow is not just white. It's lots of colors, but that said, it's in a really tight color range. And the secret is to find that perfect range to render snow that looks like snow. So this is the pond garden in in winter. And then next slide. This is that same pond garden in the spring, and you can see that there's green everywhere now, and there's that tender, beautiful little new green that is the green of spring. And in this particular rendering of that pond garden, you see a piece of garden art, this cement flamingo or whatever that bird is. I don't know much about birds. But so this is that pond garden in winter. Next slide. This is the same pond garden, a much closer look at it. This is just the water and the water lilies. One of the things I love about water lilies is how they cup and hold the water. Some of them are above the surface of the water, so you see the reflection and the darkness of the shadow they cast. But you also see that if they sit just at the surface of the water, they hold some of that water, and you see the sky reflected in the lily pad and in the water that the lily pad is sitting on. So this is the pond garden in summer. And then finally, next slide. This is that same pond garden, and it's in the fall. The colors have changed. The greens are different. The color of the water is a little different. Now, besides being 4 landscape paintings, and these are large paintings of the same spot, they were, and I did them because I wanted to do them, but there was another reason I did them. I had been asked to create a suite of paintings for the common areas of the new hospice center that Huntsville Hospital was building. And I wanted to do that very much. So I had to think of what would be a good subject that would act as a metaphor for a life journey. And that's where the idea of the pond garden in all 4 seasons came from. I hoped that these paintings would be of some comfort for the families who were there to see their loved ones and for the patients themselves. I was so pleased to be asked to do these paintings, and I'm very proud of them. I like them, and I hope they bring comfort to those who look at them. Okay, next slide. Now, this is water lilies once again, but a very different kind of view. This is a garden that for decades, artists have been visiting and painting and marveling at. This is a garden in Giverny, Monet's home, where Ed and I visited one day with 10,000 of our closest friends. And in my fantasy, when I went to Giverny and saw Monet's home and gardens, maybe there would be 25 other people there, and we'd just roam around and chat. And well, it wasn't like that at all. It was hard to even get a vantage point to take a photograph. But nevertheless, I was just struck with the beauty of the place, and to see with my own eyes scenes that Monet himself had painted was just a real thrill. So when I got back home, I did some very quick sketches and took a few photographs of that garden. And when I got back home, this is a painting I made. It's fairly large. And I was struck by that red tree in all of that green. So next slide. Well, we began with snow, and we're going to end the landscape series with snow. This is one of my favorite landscape paintings that I've done. One morning after snow had been predicted, and I looked out my dining room window, this is what I saw. This is my backyard when I lived in Huntsville, when we lived there. And as all of you know who live in Huntsville, remember all the times the weatherman said it was going to snow and then it didn't, and the kids were all disappointed, and there were a lot of adults that were disappointed too, because we'd gone out and bought all that milk and bread. And we, we had all that stuff on hand and then nothing happened. Well, this time it did. And I was as excited as a child when I looked out and I saw what I could just see out my window in my backyard. So I dressed fairly quickly and went out with my camera and a small sketchbook. And I made a couple of quick drawings with some color notes and photographs. And this is the painting that I made. You can see in this one what I was talking about in rendering snow, I think. The easy part of snow is the bright whites and the very dark snow. It's the middle range of hues that you need to get right to be convincing as snow. So I finished the painting and I was happy with it, but it just needed something. I wanted it to have something else. I wasn't even sure what it was. And for some reason, I was thinking about fairy tales and stories you tell children. And I thought of Red Riding Hood and going through the woods to grandmother's house. So I decided to put her in this painting. And if you look, it'll be on the viewer's left in the top third, very near the edge, there are a couple of brush strokes of red, and that's Red Riding Hood on our way to grandmother's house. And this is called Looking for Red Riding Hood. So now we will have the next slide and we'll move on to some still life paintings. And the first one, this is blue hydrangeas in a glass vase, a glass pitcher. This is what I was talking about, liking you to see something up close. This is a very close-up view of what I want you to look at, the blue hydrangeas in this glass pitcher. Now, I was at Ned's house in Augusta. I was visiting. This was years ago, probably 3 years ago. And he had this giant blue hydrangea bush in his yard, and I just went a little crazy and I started cutting, and I found that glass pitcher and I posed it, and I spent a good 45 minutes to an hour getting it just the way I wanted it and then photographing it, and that was fun. But then the best part of that morning was Charlotte, my granddaughter, who was maybe 11 at the time, 10 or 11, got her watercolor set and her paper, and we stood there together and she painted this, and I was able to give her some tips, and we just had a grand time that morning while she painted, and I thought about the painting that I'd make when I got home, and this is the one I made. Glass is fascinating to paint, clear glass, because it has no intrinsic color. It only becomes its form by what it reflects and by what it absorbs, the colors and forms it reflects and absorbs. And it's tricky sometimes to get that right, but when you do, it's very satisfying. Okay, next slide. This is Forsythia in the time of Corona. This is a painting that I made. It's a big painting. It's 30 by 40. I mean, it's 36 by 48 inches. And I made it when we were quarantined all that. Remember when we had to stay in just for weeks and you got groceries delivered and you went a little stir crazy. Well, I needed something that would occupy my hours, and this is what I chose. And for years, I've kind of been known in my old neighborhood as a Forsythia stalker, because every year I try to do another Forsythia, a different one. This one happened to be in my neighborhood. It was on my walking route and was maybe 8 or 9 blocks from my house. And when it was in full bloom one day, I photographed it and did a quick sketch. And I introduced myself to the woman in whose yard it was and asked her permission. And she said, of course. And I was later able to show her the painting or an image of the painting. So that was my Forsythia in the time of Corona. Next slide. This is a very different kind still life. Because of the subject matter, it's a sheet on an oriental rug, and it's a piece of linen that's just been kind of thrown down on a floor. But the idea for this painting, this is called Loss. The idea for this painting came because, now you're gonna laugh at this, but when I'm working, I have a TV on and it's company, it's just voices in the room. Every episode of Law and Order, I know the plot because I've watched them over and over again. And in the early years of that show, as a lead in to each episode, there was a quick still of a floor with a sheet over a body. But you didn't see the body, you just saw the sheet, and your mind told you there was a body under it because you could kind of see the shape of a body. Well, I thought about that and thought about it, and I thought, I want to try to paint that. I had used these color combinations before, the white linen on top of a brightly colored oriental rug, which was in my living room. So I got a sheet and I had Ed arrange it over my form. I kind of laid down on the floor and curled my body and threw one of my arms up, and I said, now to cover me up with that sheet and take a photo on your cell phone so I can check it. Well, we went through several iterations of the sheet over my body, and then he would take the photo, and we finally got one I liked, and I saw the shape I wanted the sheet to be. So I then arranged the sheet in that way and photographed it myself with my camera. And so that's the painting that resulted. I did about 3 of these in that series of white linen on the oriental rug. So that's my Law and Order painting. Okay, next slide. This is just a really straightforward, traditional kind of still life. I use things in still life painting that I like and that I own. And this is a little bowl that Tom Church made, who is a wonderful woodworker in Sewanee. And I bought this bowl once at a craft fair, and I've loved it. I treasure this bowl, and I've painted it many, many times. And I like the echo of the red in the bowl in that wood to the cherries that bowl is holding. Okay, next slide. And the final still life is the oldest one. This was done in 2 studios ago. This was done in my downtown Franklin Street in Huntsville studio. And one of the things I most loved about that studio was the wide windowsills. It was an old building built in the 1800s and had very wide windowsills. And I actually would do arrangements on those windowsills and photograph it and then work from those photographs. I did figures, I did still life compositions. This is a bowl of lemons. The crocheted mat underneath that bowl and plate is one my mother made years and years ago, and I've painted it many, many times. I asked her, could I have one to bring home once I visited her? And she said, of course. What are you going to do? Don't you want the set? I said, no, I just need one. I need one to paint. So, and I've still got it and I treasure it. All right, now we will move on. Oh, no, there's one more. I forgot. Remember the series? This is a combination of tissue and fruit, and it goes back years. I've done this many years, combining those 2 elements. I love the combination of textures. They're always different, and the color contrast is nice. With white tissue, it always picks up a little bit of the color, and it adds mystery when you don't see the whole thing. You only see a part of that pear. And I call this pear in the witness protection program because you only see a little piece of the pear. One of my favorites. Now, I think we're done with and we're going to move on to figurative paintings.
Helen, do you mind
Yes.
if I ask a question real quick? Some of the folks are asking what the media is on some of these. So, and I know you've been saying painting, but I think that the lemons, weren't they pastel?
The lemons are pastel and everything else you've seen is an oil painting.
Great, thank you.
Oh, sure. I should have said that at the beginning. Okay. Now we'll go to the figurative pieces. This is a piece that's probably the most autobiographical painting that you'll see today in this selection. This is called Against the Wall. It was painted at a time, it's an oil on canvas. It was painted at a time when I had a health scare. Like many women, I had to have a biopsy with a suspect lump. And luckily it turned out to be nothing. But it was at that time, before I knew it was nothing, that I started this painting. And that's kind of how I was feeling it, you know, who knows what's going to happen. But right now I feel like I'm kind of up against the wall. Okay, next slide. This is an older oil painting and was the first time that I used gold leaf in combination with a figure. I had used it before. No, it wasn't the first time, but it was an early time when I used gold leaf in combination with a figure. This painting is called Ash Wednesday and is one in a series of paintings of women that are reclining either on their back or on their side or somehow in a very relaxed position, many times with their arms spread. I like this painting a lot. It's called Ash Wednesday because I finished it on an Ash Wednesday. That's the reason it's called that. Let's see, is there one more? Yes, oh, the one I wanted to talk about. Yes, this is Recognition Across the Divide, which is a painting that, a mixed media piece that you'll see in the exhibition that's on view now in the Works on Paper. Here's the story about this painting and why it's called what it is. One day, this is years and years ago, I was having lunch at a kind of new restaurant. I had met a friend for lunch at a newish restaurant in Huntsville on University Drive. I remember where it was, but I couldn't begin to tell you the name of the place. I don't remember. I don't think it's in existence anymore. And before we ate, I needed to go to the ladies' room. And so I excused myself. And there was a long corridor. I was directed to a long corridor where the restrooms were, but there were no windows. It was very dark for some reason. It didn't have a lot. There was some light, but not a lot. And as I walked down the corridor, I saw a woman coming toward me, and I knew she looked vaguely familiar, but it's like two things occurred to me. Oh my goodness, she's out of context. Who is this? She looks so familiar. I know her. And what is her name? I'm going to pass her, and what if I can't remember her name? And I was getting closer and closer. You know that feeling. And within 2 seconds, I looked up and I realized that what I was doing was looking in a mirror, and I was seeing myself. But I don't look like this, I thought, because I thought I looked more like my mother's age. Well, you know, have you ever had that feeling? So it's called Recognition Across the Divide because the divide was the years, of course. I'm one age in my head, but I'm another age in the mirror. So it was not too long after that experience, that personal experience, that I had worked with this model before and had lots of photos of her. And I looked at this one and I thought, oh, that's what I want to do. I want to show her twice looking at herself. once as a charcoal drawing and once as charcoal and colored pencils and pastel in color. So that's the story of Recognition Across the Divide. So I think that's it for the pictures in the slide presentation.
That's
And-
great, Helen. So we know that you're in the studio.
Yes.
And I'm very intrigued. You've got work in process behind you. So why don't you give us a tour of your new space and what you've been working on?
I'd love to do that. All right. Now, this is 2 panels in what will be a triptych still life. And I'm gonna hold up the 3rd panel here so you can see it. Just don't have another easel handy. So when it's done, this will be the composition. Okay, so take a good look. I'm gonna put this back down and then talk about it a little bit. What you see here is a good example of my working method. I do the drawing completely before I ever go with color. And in this case, for this triptych, because what makes a diptych or a triptych work is when there are passages that echo each other across the divide, across the separation. In this case, it will be the folds in the cloth on which these silver bowls are sitting. And the cloth will be the common element. It's the same color in all 3. The silver bowl will be the continuing element, but the fruit is different. And once I got it drawn, I realized that what I wanted to do was include, a couple of cherries with the lemons, even though they weren't in the photograph. I added them to take your eye here, and the same thing here. I added a lemon so that there is a content continuation as well. This one's proving very fun to do. So there's that going on.
And Helen, let me ask just quickly, how long do you anticipate it will be before that piece is complete? And are you working on anything else along with it in the meantime?
It will be complete when I'm 102. No, that was a joke. I imagine this piece will take start to finish 9 weeks or so, 9 or 10 weeks.
Okay.
I work every day, but I don't work 8 hours every day. So, I have to parcel my time.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and is there anything else when you're typically working on something like this, Helen? Are you working solely on one thing, or do you do several works simultaneously?
Well, if I'm doing just a single image, I will work on more than one thing at a time. In this case, I consider these 3 images.
I
So
see.
I'll go back and forth to keep the colors constant and to keep everything in balance. I won't finish one completely before I go to the other one. I'll work on all 3 at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely.
Working on just one thing, I typically do work on another thing, and I'll show you an example of that as we move around the studio. Also, just don't forget to eat your fruits and veggies. This is a new little painting that I've just completed. I don't know where it comes from that I'm so obsessed these days with fruits and vegetables, but I am. Now we're going to move right over here. This is a just completed painting. These tomatoes, 7 tomatoes on a blue glass plate. This is another in the series of hydrangeas. I'm still working on this. So I occasionally come back to this one. And I've got my notes that we talked about. And I saved the palette paper that I mix up the paint on when I'm away from something for a while so that I can go back and match the colors. Oh, and you might like to see, these are the reference photos for the triptych that I'm working on. So I print these on the computer, and digital photography has changed my life.
Actually, one of our folks have asked a question about your photos. Do you consider your photos to be works of art? Or
no, I do not. They are my tool to produce a work of art, I hope. And lots of the photos never make it to the painting stage. One of the things that happens, I think, when you're a painter is I need to be really engaged with an idea. And I can look at something and think, oh, that'll make a nice painting, photograph it, and then 2 days later, and I look at it and I think, well, not so much. You know, I'm not in love with it anymore. For me, the idea has to keep recurring and being built on and being kind of muscled up before I want to commit to the weeks that it will take to turn it into a painting. So I take way more photographs than ever make it to this stage. And as you can see, this is the heart of the studio right here. This table and my easel, this is where I work. I stand in a pretty small radius and I move back and forth because it's all right here. This is created with just one tube of paint, a greenish umber that's really thinned down. And I'm just doing a quick oil sketch, very loose, to reinforce the drawing and to work as a guide before I ever get to the color part of this painting. And I actually love this part of the process. I love every part of the process, which has kept me painting for 50 years. You've got to love it if you keep doing it for that long. And I do. I truly love what I do. So let's see. Over here, do we need to look over here, Ned?
sure, if you like.
Okay, they're just supplies over here. Oh, but I have more natural light in this studio than I've ever had in a studio, because it used to be a sunroom and it's got all these windows or all this glass. And you can see that we mounted some blinds because it got, some shades, because it got too bright sometimes. It's actually too bright, too much light to work sometimes. And Ned found these wonderful shades that I can raise and lower to the floor if need be, and I can absolutely control the light at any time of the night or day, and that's wonderful. There's one more little thing I want to show you, and then we're going to move to another room. I've just hung this little self-portrait right here so I can keep an eye on myself in the studio. So let's move into the room in here where I'll show you some paintings in our collection. And I'll start with this one. This, remember we talked about the series and the pairs. Well, this is the pair painting that when I finished it, Ed said, could we keep one? And I said, yes. Do you want to keep this one? And he said, yes. And the rule in our house is, because he's been so supportive through the years of what I wanted to do, you couldn't ask for a better partner or supporter than Ed has been to me. The rule is, if he wants to keep it, we keep it. And so he wanted to keep this one, and we're keeping it. And this is the most recent figurative piece, which was completed also in the time of Corona. This is called Celebrating Eve, of Adam and Eve fame. Actually, this wonderful model, her name is Blair, was posed and photographed in an interior, an indoor setting on this couch. And I wanted her outdoors. I wanted the painting to be about Eve and the suggestion of a garden. And so I actually physically got a piece of plywood the size of this canvas, and I built a leaf wall. I actually stapled and taped leaves and limbs and to this piece of plywood and photographed it so I would have a reference for when it came time to make this painting. So that's Celebrating Eve. This image of all my images is probably the best known. This is the second version of this diptych, Anna on an Oriental rug, that I've done. The first was oil paintings that were bigger than this, but the image was the same. And those are the paintings that Peter or David, I can't remember, mentioned were in the Smithsonian in the National Gallery in an exhibition that then toured. And that was a wonderful experience. I love being in that exhibition and having my work as part of it. This is pastel on museum board. This piece is our family again, and it's a mixed media work that I made when Ned returned after 3 months in New Zealand and Australia when he was there doing a film. And we were all so excited to see him and hear his stories. We met at the beach in North Carolina, and I had a friend take a photo of us. And this is the photo that he took, and I made the drawing from that photo. I did one drawing and cut us out and mounted us on top of another drawing with it's mounted on foam core and then put together. And I've always liked this drawing of the four of us, Anna, Ed, me, and Ned. And then finally, two more of the children. My cameraman, who's no longer a child. This is a painting of Ned that I did when he was 18. He was quite a good guitarist then and is still, I think. And then this is the first painting that I did of Anna. She was 7. And that chair I still have in this living room, but it's been recovered 3 times since then. So there you go. So let's walk back into the studio, and if you have questions, I'd love to answer.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for touring us not only through the studio, Helen, but also through your home gallery and showing us some of your private collection of your work. We have a question from John, and he is interested in how you were able to achieve the symmetry in Across the Divide.
I just drew it very, very carefully. Yeah, but the way, I think I know why he's asking that question, because it's the same photograph, but it's reversed. The image is reversed. And I think I probably took that photo. I had taken the photo, but this was still film days. I think I had taken that negative to Sutherland Photo. And I think I asked Malcolm, is there a way you can reverse this so I can have the mirror image? And he said, of course I can. And I think maybe Jim Bishop did it. And I had 2 images to work from. So that's how I did it.
And I actually have a question about that particular piece. Your use of color versus black and white. Was the use of black and white to also sort of put it into a context of like time, like a black and white photograph?
Uh, Well, I wasn't thinking of a black and white photograph, but I certainly was thinking of time in that we see ourselves one way at certain times in our lives and then another way in different times of our lives. And we see different things about ourselves depending on our age, I think. So yeah, that's getting at it. Absolutely.
Okay. Helen, we have time for one more question. Margaret asks, has the move from Huntsville to your new location been a challenge for you getting settled in and for you starting to create again?
Well, the honest answer is yes, it has been a challenge. I don't think you leave a home you've been in for 56 years and it not be a challenge, if you know what I mean. But I'm really glad we did it. And we love our new home and we love being near family. And when I began to paint again, after about 2 months of unpacking boxes and doing the things you do when you move, I began to feel kind of really at myself again, if that makes sense, because I really do have to create art. It's as necessary to me as breathing. And I know that sounds dramatic, but for me, that's true. So it was a challenge, but it's a challenge that we've met and we are happy and we miss you all, however. That part doesn't go away quickly.
Well, Helen, it's great to see you and to see you thriving in your new environment and adapting. I know it's not easy, having gone through a similar situation recently, living someplace for decades and uprooting. And the older you get, the harder it becomes, but you've made it work and you've got such a great space to work in. So thank you again for spending time with us, for sharing your insights into your creative process and what you're doing now. I also want to thank everybody who signed up for this session today. And I want to encourage you all to join us again on February 11th, when we'll visit master artist Dean Mitchell from his studio in Tampa, Florida. Dean's Encounters solo exhibition is currently on view at the museum through March 20th, 2022. And you can go to the museum's website right now at www.hsvmuseum.org and sign up for that session as you did for this session. So we're hoping to see you again in another month or so. And don't forget to come and see Recognition Across the Divide, as well as all the other great artworks in our current exhibition, looking at the collection, works on paper, on view through February 13th. Thank you again, Helen. Thank you again, audience, and have a great rest of your day.